the caller. He definitely has a question.
Welcome back, folks. This is very important. Please pay
Yes,
attention.
sir. Good evening. Welcome.
This is Professor Havlin.
From Ghana, but I'm in the UK right now. And I'm listening to the program, and I want to make a little contribution.
Go ahead. Thank you very much.
You see, an African youth crossing the Mediterranean Sea to Europe looking for greener pastures or looking for heaven, as you put it, it's not their fault. I can't blame them too much. I can use my country, your country, Ghana, as an example. Recently, I think 2 days ago, I was listening to a radio, and there is a report about the gold, the amount of gold Ghana exported to the Europe cost about almost $30-something billion. In the records of Switzerland, UK, and others, it shows that Ghana has exported gold, $30-something billion. But in the Ghanaian own records, in the government records, it's showing $20-something billion. So that difference, where did it go? So if that money is being put into the country, building infrastructure, creating jobs, opportunity, employment, and whatever, a young guy with the right frame of mind will leave, abandon the work in his country, and travel through this desert, don't even know his or her fate, whether he's going to make it or not, and say, I'm going to clean in a white man's land, or going to do a mini job in a white man's land, where he can be, respected as a king in his own land. No! Somebody struggled to have even a 1 square meal a day. A 1 square meal a day. And if you think I can hustle through the desert and go to somewhere that I can clean toilet and have a decent meal to eat, why not? So if we are talking, if these programs are, I suggest you call the African leaders, the authorities, the people who are in power, and question them about how are they using our resources.
Okay.
We're talking about slaves.
Okay.
We're talking about slavery. We're talking about what's it called, European invasion and all that. You know. Do you want to say something?
Yes. No, I just want to thank you. This discussion about these refugee or these African migrants that lost their lives, we're going to have that topic on Tuesday. Today we're talking about the stories, and we mentioned this incident that happened today as one of those stories that would be documented in another, exactly the point that you're saying. So the issue of the need for good governance on the continent should be addressed in order that the young people will stay at home. So those will be topics that we'll handle on Tuesday. So I kindly welcome you on the show on Saturday so we don't misrepresent the idea. Is it okay? But thank you so very much for your contribution. Yes, we're going to tackle that, and already we've been talking about that and holding our leaders accountable for that. But today we just want to focus on how do we, own our own narrative. Those are internal issues that we will deal with, but we're talking even about those issues that you cannot even control, and that is going to be manipulated, in a different manner. So thank you so much for your call. Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right. Over to you, sir.
Yes. Well, the caller makes a number of points. But that's a huge issue, internal political things, why people are leaving in the first place. That's a big issue that I'm not prepared today to tackle. I want to stay on message with this idea that we have to reclaim, reboot our own humanity,
Correct.
whatever that is. And that should be our focus, that if we don't have a clear idea of who we are as a people, then we're going to be in this continual turmoil that we will not find a way out. There was a movie called Get Out a few years ago, and you may have seen that. It was about a guy who was trapped in something called the sunken place. And that's kind of where many of us as African people are. We're in this sunken place of someone else's story. It's not our own, someone else's way of being, someone else's narrative. And so we have to get out of that. We have to push through the trauma zone, right? We have to show up and show out our own story, our own way of being. We have to value ourselves.
We have to bring back our natural way of being
outside of ourselves,
and cast off the narrative.
Value ourselves, then we can.
I'm black. I'm beautiful.
Perpetuating economy.
I'm light.
And have
I'm more beautiful.
Control over the vast resources that
I know how to work, create an engine. I'm valuable.
But many of the islands
I should live different than you.
Beaches, beautiful beaches, and they are beautiful, but they also
we have to change that narrative.
And so we can learn how to create different systems of trade, of economic exchange, commercial exchange. And that's something that is possible. But to do that, we have to have what one of my teachers called, Dr. Bobby E. Wright, a psychologist, we have to have a social or life theory. What are the things that we value, right? How did they come to be valued? How do we know what we know? How do we value ourselves, right? These are very fundamental things, because if we don't have those, then we can't have a sustainable future, right? If we don't understand fully and appreciate fully who we are as a people, then we'll be caught up in someone's future that they planned for us.
And that will not happen. Folks, you will know who you are shortly.
To build a rocket ship to go to Mars and the moon.
It was written that you would.
Go ahead, right? But let us.
So it shall be.
Even though that's a fantasy and that's not going to happen.
Please continue to focus and pay attention.
Right?
All that you've seen,
but those futurists
will help you to connect all your dots.
For us, where are African people going to fit in their future, right? And their idea is that we're going to fit in the same subservient role to them, to others, whether it's the Europeans or Asians. That's how they see us in their future. But we are not creating a future where we see ourselves in relationship to them. They're not going to go away. But what we can do is to create a possibility space of our own future, a parallel existence to those where we are in control of our own existence. Right now, there's a war against our existence, particularly being played out in the United States. I don't know about Europe, but there's a war against our existence. African people in the United States are criminalized since 1681. Our bodies are a weapon. They've been weaponized and they're criminals. You may have your hands up, but the police will still shoot and kill you. Oh, I was afraid. But you got the weapon. The other person had their hands up. And that's because they've been criminalized. There's laws on the books since 1681 where African people in the United States have been criminalized. We are born criminals. Every generation is going to be a criminal, right? And they use all types of race science tricks that we're genetically inferior. Of course, that's not true. But many people believe that and accept that we're less than other people. And so that's the fundamental thing that we have to challenge and overcome, is that we are the first people. We're the original people. We can trace our lineage back 300,000 years or 100,000 years, whichever one you want to choose. And so that allowed us to get to this point, right? That all these cognitive and creative capacities that we see ourselves manifesting were built up over a long period of time, right? We love music. Music can unify us because it's all there, the same rhythms. I can go to Mali and hear the same rhythms in Mali that I could hear B.B. King play. But B.B. King didn't think, he thinks that the blues came from Mississippi. But no, the blues came from Mali, right? Those chordal structures. My music teacher taught me that. Phil Corinne taught me about the connectivity of African music. And he learned how to play all aspects of African music. In Chicago, at the planetarium, he composed a suite called African Skies, where he looked at the music across the continent, because African people focus on the sky. Right? I talked about,
folks, please pay attention.
African cosmos, right? Because that's how we related to something bigger.
This gentleman is a neurosurgeon
on our localized experiences,
and he certainly
they may be. They
certainly has a good handle on where this show is going.
Nigeria, they may be in Angola. We have to look at our global and cosmic experience and reclaim that, and that's the way that we can heal these wounds. We can remake and restart our world. That's our challenge. So how are we going to do that, Dr. Tata? How are viewers, I'm not expecting an answer, but I want the viewers to think about that. What can they do to restart the African world wherever they're at?
Can you show the book again? Can you put the book?
Yes.
We missed the book. Can you hold the book again? We missed it. You were showing it.
Right. African Cosmos. Right?
Okay.
It's an exhibit at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. that people can see, that talks about how African people related to the sky. There's things that we can do if we knew that they were there. We're caught up in our local situations. I'm not dismissing them or belittling them. They're important. But we have to look at our global and cosmic situation and how we're related to something much larger than ourselves individually and ethnically and locally where we are.
Okay.
And that's what the book of you is about.
There's a question here in the chat.
What lies beneath your skin?
Why are Africans not disguising who they were before
of every
1100 BC, and where are the African historians,
but especially
pre-900 BC?
The melanated.
Oh, there's all types of African historians. If you're in West Africa, well, then you know about the Ghana, Mali, and Songhai Empire. Mm-hmm. If you're in South Africa, you know about Great Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, we know about, there's African civilizations, but the problem is that we still have colonized libraries, right? African nations tend to be dependent upon European printing companies to print their books, right? We're just really getting into writing our own books, writing our own history. Yes, there's a lot of movies. There's a wonderful BBC series on Africa. Your viewers can look that out by a Sudanese woman. I can't remember her name right now, but I can text it to you. But there's all types. The information is out there. We just have to go and get it. We have to do our own research. We have to put that research into a format that can be distributed globally, right? And your platform and others' platforms can help do that. That's something we can do. We don't have to wait. You don't have to have 100,000 euros to print your book on African history now. Now you can present your ideas on all these digital platforms, and there's a whole range of them. But we have to have some coherence to all of this because a lot of people are all over the place and talk about a lot of nonsense and crazy things too. Right? And so there has to be curated knowledge that, and there's many people around the continent and here and in Europe that are doing just that. There's people doing great things, but we have to have this conversation globally, not just amongst our local selves.
Okay. The author of that story on BBC is Zainab Badawi, Queen Irene's.
Right.
That's right. We've been reaching out to her a couple of times to get her on the show. I don't know why, but we still think that there's still a lot less in it, and she was reporting on the point of view. What is it that we're educating the other communities? I mean, that's just what I read from the critics, from who it was. It's not my own opinion. I don't represent it, but we actually reaching out to her. If we will be lucky to have her on the show, but I think that's an incredible documentary. I went through a couple of times as well. And usually when I go through that, I do my own research and particularly I look at what people say about that. Critics.
Right.
That's how we learn more. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, is that the scholarship is out here. There's people doing incredible things everywhere. But we don't yet have a life theory in order to contain all of this work, because people are doing things individually, and that's good, but we have to have a collective sense of this grander vision.
Collective.
And that's one of the reasons why I put a lot of effort in this book in talking about how did we get to be where we are today. Mm-hmm. Is that all these incredible skills that we have developed, evolved over 100,000 years, right? There's skill sets that we still have with us today that developed over that long period. But we've learned not to value them, like I talked about earlier, that we've learned to not value our own history.
To value our own history.
But among the Yoruba, they talk about the Odu Ifa, and they have hundreds, thousands of stories for specific things. But other African people have similar ideas too, and they have their own stories that they tell to their own compatriots, right?
It's just
but
a cat,
we're
folks.
Not learning.
Please don't mind.
We're not learning
She's
to see
scratching
where is the congruence between the stories in Nigeria among the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Hausa, the Fulani, and the same stories that are taking place in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right, among the Bantu, right? But when we start looking at those stories, they're saying the same thing, right? They're talking about the same ways of relating to the land, relating to the sky, relating to each other.
Relating to the land,
we have to
relating
find
to
a way
the sky.
To bring those different stories into a collective whole. What are the fundamental things that each
folks.
of them share?
I assure you of that.
And so I talk about that. There's some fundamental ideas that all of those stories share. All of those relationships, African people, as a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Edwin Nichols, I think you may have had him on your show, talks about is the whole idea of an African value relationships, that our greatest wealth is in our relationships, to each other, in our relationship to the water, to the land, to the sky. And we look across the continent, we see those same relationships expressed in local geographic terms, but it's the same thing. But we see differences because that's how we've been colonized and dehumanized and devaluing ourselves. But that happened then, right? We're not there anymore. We are recovering ourselves today, right here, right now. And so we have to continue doing that. And we are doing it. You're doing it. And others are doing it everywhere. And that's the beauty about it, that we're finding each other. Right? I thank my dear friend and colleague, Professor James Small, to help you find me, for example.
Shout out, a big shout out.
Right. Yeah. So we're finding each other. We're no longer lost. We're no longer hopeless and helpless, right? We are doing something that's incredible, that the world will benefit. Because when the world sees what we are, who we are, right, well, then they say, hey, I can copy that. I can copy that. I can copy them.
Absolutely.
Because they will see the value in that. And now
when they see that you are right again,
they're seeing value in our music.
They will.
Right? Because everyone is copying bits and pieces and sampling
the new kingdom
our music, right?
Will be appreciated by all of us immortals. Folks, the paradigm shift is here.
Black coffee.
Everyone's waking up. And I'm so glad I ran into this professor here, Hamlin. Professor, thank you for your beautiful words. And sister, thank you for your beautiful contribution.
Which they're dancing to. Right? And so
makes my job a little more easier.
Music. Just that, our music has been corrupted, at least particularly in the United States, stuff that we hear on the radios. But Fela talked about music is my weapon, right? It's the weapon of the heart, right? It's the weapon of the spirit, of the soul. And so when we hear our music, that brings us together, no matter where we're from. Someone in Soweto can hear some music in Nigeria, and they can relate to that because they will find the rhythms, right, that tunes them, that resonates with them. And so that's something that we can do, and we are doing that. We just don't have a grand vision of how to do that yet, but it's coming.
It's certainly coming. It's here.
Thank you so very much on behalf of all of us here.
Now, folks, I'd like you to pay attention to these last few moments because
shout out
this is the reason why I specifically chose the end of this 2-hour program. You're only catching the last half hour.
I heard these words in my soul.
Please pay attention.
Grace, so we can sing it again now like we were once.
And I want you to remember these words and let them resonate with you.
But in those days when we sang it,
until we get to the final upload,
like entertainment, and we didn't even know
which are days from now.
Like this decade is like exactly. Sounds like that would have a different kind of a meaning and even a sense of direction. Like we were once totally really lost, but now we are found again, right? Connecting and uniting ourselves. So we thank you so much. The energy, the time that you put in the lectures. I know I would stay in touch with you after the show, and yes, for all the connections. And then when you are coming back again, I would wish topic for us to explore. So it has been a pleasure to host you and to have you here. One last word for the evening, just a takeaway so we can relax and see ourselves again.
Well, the last word is reclaiming our narratives, rebooting our narratives, and generating new knowledge for our own liberation and validation of ourselves. And so thank you very much for hosting me. I trust that all the viewers found something valuable in our conversation and something that they can take away and use wherever they may be.
Please pay attention.
So thank you again.
Thank you so much. See us very soon, sir. Yeah. And no, one more thing, please. I just want the audience to get this. You talked about when we shake our hands. That's one. And you talked about Seba. Can you just give a short word about it? I'm very sorry. It went off my mind.
Well, Seba is a Kemetic word that meant someone offering wise instruction and wise speech, right? And that's something that we need to engage in. It goes back to something from a number of Sebas in Kemet, from Ptah Hotep. You know, he talks about wise instructions for his children, for the community. And that's something that we have to engage in, not just idle speech, but wise speech, because speech is eternal. What we say doesn't just stay here in the present, but becomes part of the whole fabric of the universe. And so they understood that in not just in Kemet, but everywhere, because people valued speech. And so your word meant something. So Seba is something that captures that. And Sia, S-I-A, that's another Kemetic word, meant mind also. But the beautiful thing about Medu Neter, or the language, the Kemetic language, is that when you reverse that, you have the word for brain. Our African ancestors in Kemet were the first people anywhere in human history that actually had a word for brain, right? When I studied neuroscience, I don't have the book in front of me, by Candell and Swartz, on the cover was the Kemetic word for brain. Now, I studied neuroscience, right? And so they acknowledged where the science of studying the brain came from. It came from Kemet in the University of Chicago Oriental Institute. There's something called the Edwin C. Smith Papyrus, named after the person who found it. And it has actual neurosurgical procedures in the papyrus dated to around 1700 BCE, before the Christian era. So the Greeks did not invent medicine, right? There was no the Hippocratic Oath came from someone, the first professional physician known as Imhotep, who was also an architect and designed what we know as the step pyramid today, outside of Cairo, Egypt. So the whole notion, that's what motivated me to study the brain. When I found out that Africans had the first word for brain, the flip of that was mind. There was no mind-brain duality like from Rene Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. No, Africans didn't have that. At least in Kemet, they didn't have that. And so we have to understand that we're building off of information that our ancestors have given us, and that's within us. We just have to bring it out and share it with others. So that's a long explanation about Seba, but the whole notion of raising your hands, right? There's a Neter in Kemet called Heka, right? And you see him with his hands raised up, and there's a twisted rope, kind of looks like DNA, right? Heka, right? Ka meaning the spirit. And so we see in rocks, painted on rocks in West Africa, in Chad and Libya, women dated to around 20,000 years ago with their hands raised, right? Because the beauty about it is that they were emitting energy. And so when we raise our hands, we're emitting energy. There's a practice in Japan called...
And folks, I will also teach you I will also teach you a...
Oftentimes you see Egyptian
actual
gods with their hands raised,
divination method,
or their hands
where you will use your hands to accomplish certain goals that I've been taught. So,
right, something very basic. You know, some years ago, when I was in Germany, in Dusseldorf, I mentioned that at a summer school, I learned about the light that our bodies emit.
And the reason why I'm saying divination is because these are the words that you and I have.
Photons coming from your brain, coming from your heart, coming from your hands.
We use to explain
coming from plants.
Practices.
I was there. I did a summer school. It was a small group of people. It was an amazing experience to see how science is validating what African people knew thousands of years ago, that we are beings of energy, and we can talk about that on another show.
Yes, please. Wow.
That's what I'm talking about. See, what I'm talking about, this is not no mumbo jumbo, hocus pocus, woo kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No.
This is an electrochemical magnetic immortal life support creation matrix program that you and I created. And it is time for us to once again reclaim our natural post and our home.
Don't use Google for your search engine.
And everyone else is invited.
Please, because they track you. Before you know, you start seeing advertisements pop up on.
Of course, if they're willing to function.
In your emails.
As we are going to learn how to function.
And just startpage.com.
Folks, I'd like to thank you for joining me for this clip.
Swedish search engine.
And I want to say to you that I realize many of you have probably been wondering why I haven't just come out with the information. Well, it's been a pretty difficult situation knowing what I have been enlightened to know, and
that we are beings of energy.
It was very important for me to first study the minds of my people. And that's what I have taken time to do. And I am finding that we are going to be okay. So this